The moment humanity's unassuming vessel, the Endeavour, crossed the boundaries of the restricted zone, no one could have predicted the consequences. To the Galactic Council, a body that ruled with an iron fist, this zone was sacred. It was a region of space that had been abandoned by even the most daring races, an ancient forgotten place, long held as off-limits due to the dangerous relics that lay hidden within its nebulous expanse. The Endeavour, a small, inconspicuous human ship, wasn't supposed to be there. It all started when the human explorers, seeking to map uncharted regions, unknowingly entered the forbidden territory. Unaware of the Council's laws, they merely continued their mission until they found something that shook the galaxy's foundations. When the Endeavour sent out its distress signal, the Council was furious. It wasn't just the act of trespassing that was intolerable, it was the audacity of humans. Their ignorance of galactic customs and their apparent disregard for authority painted a terrifying picture of a species willing to defy the rules that had been sacred for millennia. The Council wasted no time, immediately dispatching an elite fleet to capture the human vessel. Within hours, the Endeavour was surrounded by a dozen of the galaxy's most advanced warships. The humans on board, however, were not easily intimidated. The captain, John Donovan, a seasoned veteran of Earth's military forces, took immediate command. Instead of retreating or surrendering as any sensible species might have done, Donovan initiated a counter-strategy. With only limited resources, the crew executed evasive maneuvers that defied the highly calculated tactics the Council's fleet expected. Despite being outgunned, the humans used unorthodox tactics, hacking into the alien fleet's communication systems and sending the enemy into disarray. The Council's technologically superior warships were left in a state of confusion as the Endeavour darted through space like an unpredictable storm. This first defiant act was more than just a tactical victory. It was a clear signal to the Council that humanity wasn't just another insignificant race in the galaxy. They didn't conform to the rules that had held the galaxy together for millennia. The humans were something else entirely, wild, resourceful, and impossible to predict. When the Endeavour was finally caught and boarded, the human crew was taken in chains. They were forced to face the Council's might in a grand courtroom, a space of ancient marble and cold, silent judgment. In this moment of capture, however, the Council made a grave miscalculation. They underestimated the humans not just as individuals, but as a species. They assumed that once the humans understood the full weight of galactic law, they would bow to it. What the Council didn't know was that humans had already learned the most important lesson of all. To survive, they had learned to adapt, and in doing so, they had broken every rule that the galaxy had ever written. As the alien authorities prepared to pass judgment, Captain Donovan, with a quiet, determined voice, said one simple phrase that reverberated across the courtroom. "You've made a mistake. The rules of the galaxy aren't our rules, and we'll break every last one of them." As the humans were dragged into the Council's colossal courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. A hushed silence fell over the assembly as the galaxy's most powerful species stared down at the small, defiant group of humans. The Council's leaders, each representing a different ancient race, looked on with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. The Vraxians, insectoid creatures with mandibles that could snap bones, were the first to speak, their leader's voice vibrating like an earthquake. "You stand before us, weak and insignificant, a mere speck in the vastness of the galaxy. And yet, you challenge the rules that have kept order for millennia." Captain Donovan's eyes never wavered. His hands were shackled, but his posture was unbroken. "You think you're the only ones who can make rules? That the galaxy belongs to the likes of you? I've got news for you. We're not your subjects. We don't follow rules just because they're handed down by the self-appointed masters." The Council's silence was deafening. The Eldrin, a race of telepathic beings whose minds were older than entire solar systems, exchanged glances. Their most senior member, a towering figure of pure energy, leaned forward, speaking without sound, but in thoughts that cut through the air. We've heard of your kind, humans, known for your unpredictability and relentless defiance. But no species, not even the Vraxians or the Dracari, have dared breach the Galactic Code. For this transgression, the penalty is absolute. You will be imprisoned in the Forbidden Sector for eternity. The words were cold, calculated, and final. It was a sentence the Council had delivered countless times to lesser species who dared to defy their decrees. Yet Donovan remained calm, his voice sharp and unwavering. "That's your way of thinking, not ours," he replied. "You sit on your thrones, convinced that you're gods. But what if we told you that the rules you've enforced for millennia, rules you've never questioned, are nothing but shackles? You call them laws, but to us, they're chains." The Vraxian judge hissed in anger, the air vibrating with the pressure of his wrath. "Enough," he roared, his mandibles snapping. "We will teach you the consequences of defying us. This trial is over." But Captain Donovan wasn't done. He glanced at his crew, each one a seasoned fighter, a soldier who had been forged in the crucible of humanity's wars. They had endured the worst that the universe could throw at them, and had always found a way to survive. With a flick of his hand, Donovan sent a signal to his ship's AI, a sentient program designed to think faster than any organic mind. And then it happened. The courtroom, despite its towering walls and advanced security measures, was suddenly thrown into disarray. The lights flickered, and the walls trembled. A low hum echoed through the chamber as the Endeavor, though far from its original location, broadcasted a signal that could be heard across the galaxy. The human ship was broadcasting a scrambled message, its contents encrypted in such a way that even the Council's best minds struggled to decipher it. The humans weren't alone. The ship had triggered a series of simultaneous strikes throughout the Council's network, a cascade of subtle, calculated attacks. Systems began shutting down, and the courtroom itself was filled with panic as the security grid failed to contain the incoming chaos. The Council's arrogance had cost them. In their hubris, they had failed to recognize that humanity, though young and raw, had something the galaxy had never seen before: ingenuity, adaptability, and an absolute refusal to obey rules that no longer made sense. As the room descended into chaos, Donovan's voice cut through the noise, steady and cold. "We've just started, and you've already lost control. There are no rules anymore, not where we're concerned. And we're not the only ones who think that way." Before the Council could react, the humans activated a final, unforeseen surprise. An encrypted signal capable of disrupting even the oldest systems in the galaxy. And with it, the humans vanished into the stars, leaving behind nothing but the lingering chaos they had created. The once infallible Council was shaken to its core. But what frightened them the most was this: humans didn't need to follow the rules to win. The aftermath of the humans' daring escape from the Galactic Court left the galaxy on edge. News of their audacity spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the Empire's most stable systems. The Galactic Council had always prided itself on unchallenged control, but now, one species, a species they had initially dismissed as insignificant, had shown they could not only survive under their rule, but actively fight back. And fight back they did. Within weeks, humanity's resistance movement gained momentum. What began as a desperate escape from their captors had transformed into a full-fledged rebellion. Captain Donovan and his crew became symbols of defiance, their faces emblazoned on the galaxy's dark corners, inspiring oppressed populations and stirring the hearts of those long subjugated by the Council's draconian rule. The humans had sparked something that the Council could not control, a fire that spread beyond the immediate conflict and reached the most distant corners of the galaxy. Using their limited resources, the humans began to strike at the Council's infrastructure. They hit supply lines, sabotaged communications, and hacked into the galactic banking systems to redistribute funds to the rebellion's growing ranks. They attacked in the dead of night, and their tactics were as unpredictable as the stars themselves. Every human action was a shot in the dark, a ghost in the machine. The larger, more organized armies of the Council were forced to follow protocols that were no longer effective against an enemy that refused to fight by the established rules. Their first major victory came when they targeted an important trade route controlled by the Dracari, a brutal warrior species known for their immense physical strength and ruthlessness. The humans, with their smaller numbers and unconventional warfare techniques, outwitted the Dracari, launching a surprise raid that crippled the trade system for an entire quadrant. The Dracari fleet, expecting an easy victory, was caught off guard by human guerrilla tactics, forcing them to retreat in shame. But it wasn't just physical combat that made humans dangerous. They were master tacticians, able to think several moves ahead. While the Council focused on hunting down the human rebels, Donovan and his crew had already anticipated the move. They had established secret bases on forgotten moons, in asteroid belts, and even in derelict space stations left behind by civilizations long gone. These bases became their strongholds, and from these hidden fortresses, the humans launched more and more audacious raids. They stole advanced alien technology and turned it against the very species that had once looked down on them. The greatest victory came when they managed to infiltrate the Vraxian homeworld, a heavily fortified planet surrounded by layers of defensive weaponry. Using a combination of deception and sabotage, they planted a virus in the Vraxian defense grid that temporarily disabled the entire planetary shield, allowing the human fleet to slip through undetected. The humans didn't just infiltrate the Vraxian capital. They exposed a glaring weakness in the so-called indomitable defenses of the galaxy's greatest powers. As they ransacked the Vraxian archives, uncovering forgotten alien weapons and secrets of the galaxy's past, the message became clear. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were dismantling the established order piece by piece, showing that the rules the Council had enforced for millennia were outdated and obsolete. However, this success didn't go unnoticed. The Council's response was swift and brutal. Their elite enforcers, known as the Echelon Guards, were dispatched to crush the rebellion once and for all. These beings were genetically engineered to be the galaxy's most deadly force, calculating, efficient, and merciless. Despite the overwhelming odds, humanity's resolve only grew stronger. As they received word of new recruits joining the rebellion from every corner of the galaxy, be it alien slaves, disgruntled military officers, or forgotten civilizations, Donovan's team realized that they were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for a future where no one could control them, a future where they would set their own rules. The galaxy was about to witness a revolution unlike any it had ever seen. The galaxy was unraveling, and the Council's carefully constructed order was crumbling under the weight of humanity's unexpected rebellion. What had started as isolated skirmishes had now escalated into a full-scale war. Humanity's tactics were unconventional, their resolve unshakable, and their unpredictability made them impossible to predict. Despite their numerical disadvantage, the humans had exposed a weakness in the galaxy's might, one that was now impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council, in a rare moment of unity, called for a meeting of the highest-ranking leaders from every faction. Desperation echoed in the voices of the alien representatives as they discussed their options. The Vraxians, known for their strength and resilience, were infuriated by the human raids. The Eldrin, though psychic and formidable, found their control slipping as more and more systems fell under human influence. Even the once proud Dracari were disoriented, their warrior culture shaken by the humiliation suffered at the hands of what they once considered a lesser species. "We must eliminate them," the Vraxian leader rumbled, his voice like the grinding of gears. "These humans must be destroyed before they breed chaos beyond our control." "We have tried that," the Eldrin spokesperson replied, his thoughts dripping with disdain. "Their tactics defy all expectations. The Echelon Guards failed. The most powerful forces in the galaxy could not stop them. The humans are not a typical enemy. They are a plague, infecting everything they touch." Despite their panic, the Council remained divided. Some leaders advocated for extreme measures, including the complete annihilation of human settlements and colonies, while others believed there was still a chance to subdue them through more ruthless tactics. But as the days passed, the humans' influence only grew. Entire star systems, once firmly under Council control, fell into chaos as former allies joined the rebellion. Meanwhile, Captain Donovan was making plans of his own. The rebellion had never been more vulnerable, yet it had never been more dangerous. The humans had exposed cracks in the Council's armor, and Donovan knew the next move would determine the future of the galaxy. In a war council held in a hidden base located in the deep reaches of a dying star system, Donovan and his closest allies discussed their next move. The Echelon guards had failed to stop them, but the next response from the Council would be far worse. They would likely unleash their most powerful weapon, the Siphon, a massive war machine capable of draining the life force from entire planets. Donovan's mind raced. If the Council unleashed the Siphon, no system, no colony, no resistance would be safe. The weapon could wipe out the heart of the rebellion, turning the tide of the war in an instant. But there was a glimmer of hope. Intelligence reports suggested that the Siphon was still in the experimental stage, and it was based on a technology that was only partially understood by the Council. "This is it," Donovan said, staring down at the holographic map of the galaxy. "We need to destroy the Siphon before it's operational. If we can cripple their weapon, we break their back. It's the only way we can survive." The plan was simple in concept, but incredibly dangerous. The Siphon was located on the far side of Council-controlled space, deep within an impenetrable fortress guarded by fleets of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. No human force could hope to match the sheer power of the Council's military at this stage. But Donovan had never been one to back down from impossible odds. "We'll need every ally we can muster," Donovan continued. "We've made contact with enough discontented species across the galaxy that we can form an army. It won't be enough to fight them head-on, but it will be enough to disrupt their defenses." As the rebellion's forces gathered, an unlikely coalition began to take shape. Former slaves of the Dracari, exiled Vraxians, and even a splinter faction of the Eldrin offered their support. These factions, long divided by centuries of mistrust and old grudges, now found common ground in their hatred for the Galactic Council. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had united races that once thought they were too different to ever work together. But despite the growing strength of the rebellion, the Council had not been idle. The Siphon was nearing completion, and if it became operational, it would be the end of everything. The Council's next strike was coming, and it would be brutal. Donovan knew they had no time to waste. The rebellion was on the verge of breaking, and the clock was ticking. If they failed to destroy the Siphon, humanity would lose everything they had fought for. The final strike was imminent. The rebellion, though fragmented and battered, had managed to assemble a coalition unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Former enemies stood side by side with humans, each bound together by a singular purpose: to destroy the Siphon before it could change the course of history forever. Captain Donovan stood at the command center of the endeavor, his eyes scanning the map of the heavily fortified Council world where the weapon was housed. It was the heart of their power, a moon surrounded by a fleet of warships that outnumbered the rebellion's forces by 10 to 1. If they were going to succeed, they had to be smarter, faster, and more relentless than ever before. "We only have one shot at this," Donovan said, his voice steady despite the stakes. "Once we hit the Siphon, we need to be out of there before the Council's reinforcements arrive. We're on borrowed time." The alien coalition, though diverse in culture and method, had learned the power of human ingenuity. A group of Dracari engineers had managed to develop cloaking technology strong enough to hide their ships from Council sensors, while Vraxian mercenaries offered their advanced weapons technology. Eldrin psychics created false sensor readings to confuse the Council's radar, buying them precious time to execute their plan. The fleet set off, a mix of human, Dracari, Vraxian, and other alien ships slipping through the darkness of space toward the Council fortress. The countdown had begun. The Siphon was the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, capable of draining entire planets of their energy. If activated, it would wipe out all life in its path, leaving nothing but husks of once thriving worlds. The rebellion knew that this was not just a fight for freedom, but for the survival of every species that called the galaxy home. As they approached the moon where the Siphon was housed, the Coalition fleet split into two groups. One to distract the Council fleet, the other to infiltrate the moon's defenses. Donovan led the second group, a small, elite team aboard the Endeavor. Their goal was simple: disable the Siphon, or die trying. The moon's surface loomed large on the view screen, its dark, jagged landscape heavily guarded by automated defense systems. As the ships neared, a barrage of laser fire erupted from the surface, but the human ships dodged and returned fire with precision. Explosions lit up the black sky as the Council fleet, caught off guard by the unexpected assault, scrambled to defend their precious weapon. On the surface, Donovan's team landed in a desolate canyon far from the main defense grids. The plan was to infiltrate from the ground, bypassing the heavily protected airspace. As they moved silently through the moon's labyrinthine tunnels, the sounds of distant explosions echoed in the distance. The larger fleet was holding the Council's attention, but the humans and their allies had no time to waste. Donovan's heart raced as they reached the Siphon's control center, a massive cold structure buried deep beneath the surface. The weapon's hum reverberated through the air, a constant reminder of the devastation it could unleash. They were close, but the final stretch would be the most dangerous. Every step forward brought them closer to the Council's elite enforcers, the Echelon Guards, who had been dispatched to protect the Siphon at all costs. A sudden harsh voice echoed over the comms. "Captain Donovan, this is Drakari forces. The Council's fleet has regrouped. They've brought reinforcements. We've bought you as much time as we can, but you need to move now." Time was running out. Donovan and his team sprinted through the narrow halls, their weapons drawn. The Echelon Guards were closing in. Suddenly, they heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. The Echelon Guards had found them. With a primal roar, the battle erupted. The human rebels fought with brutal efficiency, but the Echelon Guards were an elite force, stronger, faster, and relentless. The narrow corridors became a maze of gunfire and flashing energy shields as both sides clashed, neither willing to give an inch. Donovan fought with everything he had, his team falling back in tight formation, each member covering the other. In the chaos, a massive explosion rocked the building. The Drakari, in a final act of desperation, had detonated a nearby weapons depot, creating an opening. Donovan seized the moment, rushing toward the Siphon's control room. With only seconds left before reinforcements arrived, Donovan and his crew managed to breach the control room, the heart of the weapon's power. There, surrounded by a maze of wires and glowing alien technology, they worked in synchrony. They had one chance to disable the Siphon, one moment to ensure the galaxy's survival. Donovan's hand hovered over the control panel. With a deep breath, he slammed his fist down, initiating the self-destruct sequence. The countdown to the Siphon's self-destruct echoed in Donovan's ears as he gripped the control panel. His heart pounded in his chest, every second stretching like an eternity. The Echelon Guards were moments away from breaking through, their brutal efficiency closing in with deadly precision. It was now or never. "Do it," shouted Lieutenant Kira, her voice sharp through the comms. "We're not going to make it out if you don't." Donovan's fist tightened around the lever, and with one final push, he activated the self-destruct sequence. The room shuddered, the walls vibrating with the immense energy as the Siphon's power core went into overload. Sparks flew, and alarms blared, signaling the weapon's impending destruction. "We've done it," Donovan whispered, almost in disbelief. But his relief was short-lived. The ceiling above them cracked as the Echelon Guards burst into the control room, their armored forms imposing and terrifying. They had no time to react. With a roar, they opened fire. The rebels fought back fiercely, but the odds were insurmountable. Captain Donovan, his heart racing, barked orders to his team, directing them to cover the exits as they slowly made their way back toward the escape tunnel. Every move was a calculated risk, but the weight of their mission, the sheer scale of what they were about to accomplish, kept them focused. "I'm going to hold them off," Donovan said, his voice grim. "You need to get to the ship. Now." Kiera and the others hesitated, but they knew the truth. Without Donovan, their mission would fail. With a shared look of determination, they ran toward the escape route, leaving their captain behind. As Donovan turned to face the incoming onslaught, his mind flashed back to everything that had led them here. The countless lives lost, the sacrifices made, and the rebellion that had sparked when humanity first dared to defy the established order. It all came down to this moment. He could feel the weight of it in his bones. The echelon guards were upon him, but Donovan fought like a man possessed. Each move was a dance of survival, one that left his enemies staggering, their armor cracked and smoking under his relentless assault. But there were too many of them. His energy reserves were running low, his vision blurred from the intensity of the battle, and he knew his time was quickly running out. He couldn't hold them off forever. Suddenly, a deafening explosion shook the very foundation of the facility. The siphon had gone critical. The self-destruct sequence was complete, and the entire complex began to collapse around him. Donovan's heart skipped a beat as he realized the true cost of their victory. The rebellion had succeeded in crippling the Council's greatest weapon, but in doing so, they had sealed their own fate. The entire moon was now a ticking time bomb. He needed to leave now. Using the last of his strength, Donovan made a desperate sprint toward the escape tunnel. The ground beneath him shook violently as the moon's structure began to break apart, the once impenetrable fortress crumbling under the weight of its own destruction. Kiera and the rest of the team were already in the escape pods, their faces pale and strained as they prepared for launch. The Endeavor was waiting for them, cloaked and ready to make a quick getaway. As Donovan approached the final chamber leading to the escape pods, he saw the destruction unfold before his eyes. The entire facility was disintegrating. Flames and debris filled the air, and the once proud siphon lay in ruins. He heard the hissing of incoming fire from the echelon guards, their relentless pursuit narrowing his chances of survival. He dove into the escape pod just as the first wave of blast doors collapsed. The pod's hatch slammed shut, and the crew felt the jolt as the ship rocketed into space, narrowly escaping the collapse of the moon's surface. Inside the pod, Donovan slumped against the wall, exhausted. His breathing was heavy, his body aching from the battle. But there was a strange sense of finality in the air. The rebellion had won, but at what cost? "We did it, Captain," Kiera said quietly, breaking the tense silence. Donovan didn't reply immediately. He gazed out the small viewport, watching the moon behind them break apart in a fiery explosion. The siphon was gone, but the rebellion had taken heavy casualties. Many of their allies had perished, and their numbers were now far fewer than they had once been. But as he looked toward the stars, Donovan knew that this victory was just the beginning. The Council had been wounded, but it was far from defeated. The galaxy's rules had been broken, and humanity had proven that it was willing to fight for a future where freedom meant something. The cost had been high, but Donovan was resolute. He wasn't going to let this rebellion fade into the annals of history. They would fight again, and they would win. The galaxy would never be the same. The Endeavor drifted through the darkness, the stars ahead a reminder of both the vastness of the galaxy and the weight of the rebellion's journey. The escape from the collapsing moon had been harrowing, but now that they were safe, or at least as safe as anyone could be in a galaxy ruled by the Galactic Council, there was a haunting quiet on board the ship. Captain Donovan sat in the quiet of his private quarters, staring out of the viewport. The destruction of the siphon was a monumental victory, but the cost was impossible to ignore. The rebellion had lost too many good people, too many allies who had fought for freedom, who had given everything, were now gone. What now? Kira's voice crackled over the intercom, breaking his contemplation. The siphon is gone. The Council's weapon is destroyed, but the galaxy is still under their rule. We've won one battle, but not the war. Donovan sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. You're right. One battle. But it's a battle they'll never forget. The Council is scrambling, trying to recover, and they're already coming after us. That's why we can't stop now. We've got the momentum. We need to hit them harder than ever. A long silence followed, as Kira's footsteps echoed through the corridor. She entered his quarters, standing there for a moment before taking a seat across from him. We've lost so much, she said, her voice filled with sorrow and resolve. So many good people. The Drakkari, the Fractions, all those who stood by us. Donovan nodded slowly. We honor them by continuing. We fight for the future they believed in. The Council has fractured, Kira. They'll be scrambling to hold everything together. That's when we strike. Despite the grief, a fire burned in Donovan's eyes. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about freedom. The kind of freedom they had fought for, lost, and now had a taste of again. Kira exhaled, her expression hardening with determination. We have to keep fighting. We have no choice now. The galaxy won't save itself. The conversation ended with a shared understanding. They were not done yet. The siphon had been a symbol of the Council's absolute power, and its destruction had been a rallying cry for oppressed people all over the galaxy. Even in their darkest hours, they knew the rebellion had sparked something far greater than just a war. It was a movement. Donovan addressed his crew, calling them to the Endeavor's command center. His voice was steady, though the burden on his shoulders felt heavier with every passing day. We've proven they can bleed, he began, his eyes scanning the faces of his officers. The siphon was just the beginning. We've shown that we can strike at the heart of the Empire and survive. But now, it's time to turn this into something bigger. The Council is no longer invincible. The galaxy is waking up, and it's up to us to lead the charge. There was a collective murmur of agreement. The crew, battle-weary but resolute, knew they had nothing to lose. The humans had already taken on the might of the galaxy's greatest power and had left a scar on their reputation that could never be erased. And though their numbers were smaller, their hearts were full of a new kind of strength. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was rebellion with purpose. Donovan's next words hit like a call to arms. We've been given a chance to reshape the future, not just for humanity, but for every oppressed soul in this galaxy. They've been ruled for too long, and now we will give them the hope they've been denied. But we need allies. We need to inspire those who are still waiting for their moment. There's no going back. His speech ignited something in the crew. It was the spark they needed to push forward. Kira stepped forward, her eyes intense with the same fierce determination. We'll find them. The systems that are still under the Council's boot, the ones who've been forgotten. We'll bring them into the fold, one system at a time. The plan was simple, but it was dangerous. The rebellion would go on the offensive, targeting key systems that were still loyal to the Council. They would not fight directly, but rather use sabotage, intelligence, and guerrilla tactics to cripple the Council's supply chains, destabilize their political influence, and turn the galaxy's factions against them. The human rebellion had a new mission: to create chaos for the Council, and from that chaos, a new hope would rise. The aftermath. A new dawn. The Endeavor set course for its next target. As they sailed through the darkness of space, Donovan couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. The war would not be easy. There would be more bloodshed, more sacrifices. But with the Council's greatest weapon destroyed, a new path forward had opened. The fight wasn't just for the future of humanity. It was for every race and species that had been enslaved by the Council's tyranny. It was for the rebels who had given their lives so that others could have a chance at freedom. As the stars stretched out before them, the crew of the Endeavor knew they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to build something new, something worth fighting for. The rebellion had begun with humanity, but now it was a movement that belonged to every star in the galaxy. And though the road ahead would be long and perilous, Captain Donovan and his crew had no intention of stopping until the galaxy was free. Months passed, and the rebellion's campaign spread like wildfire across the galaxy. What had once been a small, desperate uprising had become a movement of undeniable force. Humanity, along with their alien allies, had struck at the heart of the Galactic Council's control, and the galaxy was beginning to feel the tremors of that shift. Captain Donovan stood at the bridge of the Endeavor, gazing out at the coordinates on the holomap before him. The Council, though fractured and scrambling to recover, had not yet fallen. The rebellion had made significant strides, but the final battle loomed ahead. Every move from this point would be crucial. "We've got a report coming in from the Vraxian sector," Kira said as she entered, her voice steady but laced with concern. "The Council is gathering its fleets. It looks like they're preparing to make one last push to crush us once and for all." Donovan's face darkened. "It's coming. They're desperate. We've taken too much from them, and now they're going to throw everything they have left at us." "This is it, isn't it?" Kira asked, her eyes locked on him. "The last stand. For us, for every world that's joined the rebellion." Donovan turned toward her, his gaze unwavering. "We've come too far to turn back now. If we don't stop them, they'll wipe out everything we've built. They'll tear apart the heart of every system we've liberated, and the galaxy will fall under their boot again. This is the moment we've been waiting for." The Endeavor's crew had long known what was at stake. The galaxy, fractured and divided, had only one chance to escape the clutches of tyranny. Donovan knew that their actions in the next few days would determine whether the rebellion would become a footnote in history or spark a lasting change that would echo across generations. "We have one shot at this," Donovan said, addressing his crew in the command center. "The Council is preparing for a final assault on our strongholds, but we have the element of surprise. We know where their fleets are gathering, and we have the advantage of unity. Our allies are ready. All we need now is to strike first, and strike hard." The room was filled with nods of agreement. Though weary, the crew was more determined than ever. The losses had been great, but they had forged a bond stronger than steel. They would finish what they had started, or they would die trying. Kira activated the holographic display. "We've identified the Council's primary fleet staging area. It's in the Korak system, heavily guarded. If we can neutralize their flagship, the Imperius, we'll deal a fatal blow to their leadership and their command structure." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "We take out the Imperius, and we cripple their ability to organize a final offensive. But we'll have to be quick. Once we make our move, the entire Council fleet will descend on us." He turned to his officers, his voice steady and filled with resolve. "We're going in. Full speed. We'll strike hard, hit them where they least expect it, and create chaos in their ranks. It's the only way we stand a chance. Let's finish this." The crew worked quickly, preparing for the final mission. Ships from their various factions, some human and some alien, began to form up in a loose fleet, ready to engage in what would be their largest battle yet. It would not be easy, and many would not return. But this was the culmination of everything they had fought for. As they made their way toward the Korak system, the anticipation in the air was palpable. The Endeavor and its allies would be outnumbered, but they had the element of surprise, something the Council had not anticipated. The rebellion was more than just a military force now. It was a symbol of hope, of defiance against an empire that had taken too much from too many. The final confrontation would be brutal. Donovan knew that, but he also knew that humanity and their allies had broken the unbreakable. They had defied the impossible, and this time there would be no turning back. The battle for the future. The Endeavor and the Coalition forces emerged from hyperspace into the heart of the Korak system. The Council's fleet was already in motion. Hundreds of ships clustered around the Imperius, the flagship of the Council's military. The sight of it, a behemoth of destruction, sent a chill down Donovan's spine. This was it, the final obstacle in their fight for freedom. "Prepare for battle," Donovan commanded, his voice loud and clear. "This is the fight we've been waiting for. We will not back down." The first waves of fire were exchanged almost immediately. Rebel ships darted in and out of the Council fleet, evading laser blasts and striking with precision. It was a brutal ballet, a deadly game of cat and mouse. Donovan's pulse quickened as he watched the battle unfold. Their allies were giving everything they had, but the Council's fleet was relentless, their firepower overwhelming. Yet Donovan knew that if they could make it to the Imperius, they could change the course of the battle. The Endeavor raced toward the flagship, evading fire and tearing through the chaos of the battlefield. The final battle had begun, and there would be no turning back.